the kind of reports you can run is under discipline. You have the student report by action. So if I was looking to find who had a detention on a certain date, I could come in and specify the date that I was looking for. So I can come in and say, show me Tuesday to Tuesday. I can select the actions that I want to work with. These are in code order. So I can come in and say, show me the detention. I want one or more occurrence. I don't care how many units are indicated, and it can be opened or closed. I want to change one of those 3 items. I can then update the actions, and it will change the information I see here. If I select more than one action, I can set it whether it's going to do an and or an or between those selections. And says they have to have all of them, and or says they can have any of them. You can limit it for students with a total number of actions to be more or equal, less or equal, or exactly a certain number. You can limit it to those with at least so many units. The default of the student is by the order of the report is by student. So if I selected more than one student, I would see them. You can consider those with the actions that represent this. So this is where I was saying earlier that you could limit based on that. You can opt to print totals only. So I don't need to see the specific times that they had. In this case, the detention, I could just say, show me how many times. You can include your infraction details or not. Expanded actions, any of these you can do. You can do grand totals. The default is to skip students with no actions, but you also can opt to include the student year of grad or homeroom. If I go ahead and print, I'm going to see anyone who has a detention on the 13th. So if I had a detention list, here are the students that have detention on that day. And it turns out it's just Amy. Now in this case, it's going to show me about 4 lines per student because I said give it to me in student order. I'm going to increase my date range here. I can also say give it to me by the action and then the date. So now if I print for the type of action it is, it's going to give me a list. And instead of 4 lines per student, I get the detention, I get the action, and then I get a list of every day that she had detention in the date range I specified. Now where I have a range of dates that Amy had detention for, as long as it crosses within that, those are the ones I'm going to see her for. So it gives me the option to see either way. But this could have been different students, in which case I get a list of what's going on. Okay. So these action date student is sort of the shortest list, because somebody who's covering the detention room might not need to know why they came in. They just need to know who's supposed to be there. The reason for setting up the status of the case to be opened or closed is you might have a student who comes to you and says, what do I still owe? So Amy has been a frequent enough flyer. She knows that sometimes the detentions are in the future. So it's, how many do I still need to show up for? You can save and recall settings so that you don't have to keep setting them up. Some of these, your print button won't go active until you have chosen at least one action before clicking on the print button. So they're saying only give me students with more than or equal to 1 action, and I can come in and see what else is going on. Just as I can do a report for the student by action, under discipline, I can also do a report by infraction. So it gives me the ability to see, again, student by infraction instead of action. I can do the date student or the student date. The thing to remember when I was doing the report by action is a lot of times those actions are in the future. So my ending date might have needed to be higher, more in the future, and I could do that. I can again select the infractions. I can recall a setting. So I can come in, pick which actions I want or infractions I want. So who has the truancy, who was fighting, whatever else I wanted to work with, who was chewing gum or my inappropriate hand gesture. I can set a minimum number of occurrences, and that can be on an individual one I want to bump it, or I can do it on them all. Again, my and or between the selections. This lets me clear it and put it back to 1. So if I go ahead and print, as we did with the infractions, we can limit on, how much information I want to see. So here I'm seeing the top line is the infraction. So there was the weapon, the tobacco violation, the teacher who reported it, location, time, weapon, and drug, alcohol. And then below that, here are my actions. So it lets me see what all was going on. And I did not say a new page, so it didn't give me that new page for what was going on. But some of these are the related students who are in that fight that Amy was in. So it lets me see. And this always tells me when I do this how many occurrences, and I can see the units that go with it. So just, what do I have that I need to look at? So we had print totals only, include my action details, which this one did. Do I want to include this expanded action? So any of these that you can pick and choose which items you want. You can also include whether they were a victim. Discipline under more reports gives you the ability to show who was the staff who reported by infraction. So that can be really handy to see who's been doing what. Someone might want to come in and say, show me everything. I'm going to skip the ones if there are no staff with no infractions. And right now I want to do it by staff. So I'm going to go through and say, show me for each of these staff members what they have reported and whom. So Mr. Armian reported the fighting incident with these 3 students. Carmine has been doing tobacco with Amy. And you can come in and see this. Because you might have a situation where the teacher or the student reports that a teacher is picking on them. So you can come in and check who else has that teacher been reporting and or what else. So, is there any validation for what's there? So it gives. You can also just, then instead of doing it by staff, and I might not want to include the action or infraction details, but I can say, give it to me by this infraction, and just print totals. That's all I want to see. So I don't need to include homeroom or anything like that. So now when I print, because I'm doing it by infraction, I can see who's reporting what and how many times. So if I have displays of affection or disturbances and other things, and I have a couple of teachers that are really high compared to everybody else, I might see that I need to give them some instructions on how do I handle that within my own classroom. So it gives the option to be able to see what's going on. Under discipline reports, you can also see that report by action, the staff report by action, which may be not as applicable, but it can be done. You can do the incident report. And when I print the incidences, I can see all of them in the date range I specify. I can include any incident notes that were put in, and I can also see the associated student infraction and action records. What's nice with that, include the victims, is when I print that now if I had that incident, so here's my bullying first, and then I have my fight, well, here's the actions that go with that fight or infractions that go with that fight, and I can see, was I consistent in the consequences? So it does give me that capability to come in and see what was going on. Other reports that you can come in is there is a statistical summary where you can come in and see when different things are occurring. Like, okay, for the tobacco violation, if I go from beginning of school to now, I want to see my totals by month. So when I print, this gives me the ability to see what months those occurrences are happening in. You can also break it out by any combination of year of grad or gender. So maybe I just want to see the gender of who this is occurring with. And if I leave it by month, I'm going to see for each month the total and then splitting it out by gender. And if I had year of grad in there too, I would see the year of grad and then the gender, the year of grad and gender. So we can do the combination of all three. And I can do this by my actions, my incidents, and so on. So I can do that sort of report for any of it. There is also a historical summary. And what that allows me to do is go back to as many school years as I want. And I believe it usually defaults to 4. So I can come in and say, in this case, I'm only going to do Amy. I'm going to do a student range where I only selected the one student. And I might want to include yearly totals versus grand totals. And I can opt to give just totals only. But by being in one school year, I can actually go back to prior school years and let it show me what's going on. This is a landscape report, but here's from this year her detail. So she didn't have anything in prior years. If she'd had, it would have shown it to me. And then I can see what's out there. So you have the infraction date and description, who reported it, the flag that goes with it, the action dates, their flags, what's my totals based on infractions and actions, and it will even show me how many are still open. So it lets me see that information. So it's just a quick way to see what's going on without having to change school years. So it's a nice feature. I had those opened actions. Under discipline, I can go into operations and I can close my open discipline actions. In here, I can pick a date. I can pick a code as to what's going on. And it will show me all of the students who have that code that's still open on the date specified. To close it, all I need to do is double click on it, and that toggles it to close, and it would actually drop me to the next record. If I needed to reopen that one, I can just double click on it. But I'm only going to see it in this list to begin with, is unless it is open, and then I would want to exit. Now this was a particular one where I had it starting from the 9th going to the 13th. So it might be that when I close, I need to be able to close the specific date and not the whole thing. But it gives you that option. But I don't have to know what the infraction was. I just need to know what the action is that's still open. Other reports that I can run. We did the discipline. We can do the student discipline notes. These are the overall notes, not the ones associated with a specific infraction or action. And then I can opt to include students with no notes. The default is yes, but I can also change it to no, so it's only going to show me those that have that additional discipline note. The other report that's here that is not just one of the supporting tables is the victim report. And in that victim report, I can include victims when the student was the offender, and I can include offenders when the student was the victim. So I can go either way with this. And then I can opt to include the incident and infraction detail and so on. So it's just a nice quick way to come in, see what was going on. So here, victims when the student was an offender. So here was the victim. And then the additional information that had to go with that. And then if the student was a victim, this is what was going on. So it does give you that option to see what was going on. And because Heidi was the victim in that fight, all of the offenders are going to show that same information. So it just gives you different ways to bring that out.